Think about the Ferrari, a machine of pure engineering prestige, costing millions of dollars. Yet it has a waiting list that stretches for years. Now, by any kind of basic logic, a price that high should drive buyers away. But it does the opposite. It actually attracts them. This creates a weird kind of tension. Why do some things become more desirable as they get more expensive, while most of the world follows a strict rule where lower prices attract more buyers? Today, we're decoding the hidden logic of the price tag. We'll explore how this constant, invisible negotiation between availability and desire dictates the cost of everything from a simple slice of pizza to a luxury supercar. And we'll uncover those strange exceptions where the laws of economics seem to break entirely. When we talk about the market, it's easy to imagine a physical place, maybe a bustling bazaar or a stock exchange floor. But in reality, the market isn't a building. It's an invisible, continuous process. Think of it as a massive global conversation happening in real time between millions of producers and millions of consumers. Every time you scan an item at a grocery store or click Buy Now on a website, you're participating in this negotiation. The price you see isn't some random number. It's a current snapshot of a tug-of-war between how much of something exists and how much people actually want it. The big question is, what actually decides that number? To make this tangible, let's step into a small neighborhood pizza shop. Meet the owner, who's standing before a massive oven, deciding how many pies to bake for the Friday night rush. The owner isn't just guessing, they're calculating. If the owner can only sell a slice for $2, they might only bake 10 pizzas, because the profit margin is just too slim. They can barely cover the cost of the flour, the cheese, and the electricity. But, and here's where it gets interesting, if the market suddenly allows them to charge $5 per slice, the logic shifts. Suddenly, the higher price justifies the cost of hiring an extra assistant or buying a high-end industrial oven to increase capacity. This is the core of the economic struggle. The producer is constantly weighing the cost of production against the potential for profit. When the price is low, the incentive to produce is low. Therefore, the owner makes fewer pizzas. When the price rises, the incentive increases, and the supply grows. This simple decision in a kitchen is the same logic that governs the global oil trade. Now, let's look at the demand curve. On a graph, it's just a simple downward sloping line, but it represents a fundamental rule, the law of demand. This is the inverse relationship between price and the quantity consumers are willing to buy. Essentially, it's common sense. If things are cheaper, people buy more. If they're expensive, they buy less. But why does this happen? There are three distinct drivers. First, the substitution effect. If the price of your favorite pizza jumps, you don't just stop eating, you substitute. You buy a taco or a burger instead. Consumers simply pivot to cheaper alternatives to satisfy the same need. Then we have the income effect. When the price of a product increases, your purchasing power drops. Imagine your weekly pizza budget is $10. If a slice is $2, you can afford 5 slices. If the price jumps to $5, that same $10 bill now only buys you 2 slices. Finally, there's the law of diminishing marginal utility. This is a fancy way of saying that the first slice of pizza satisfies your hunger immensely, but the fourth slice gives you very little additional pleasure. Because the perceived value drops with every single unit you consume, the price must fall to convince you to buy more. One technical detail to keep in mind. A change in the price moves your position along the existing demand curve, but it does not shift the entire curve itself. Now we shift our focus to the other side of the table, the producer. While the buyer's logic is about maximizing value, the producer's logic is focused on maximizing profit. This is the law of supply, and unlike the demand curve, this one slopes upward. Think back to our pizza shop owner. If the market price of a pizza rises, the owner sees a gold mine. Because prices are high, producers are incentivized to produce more to capture those higher gains. It's a cold calculation. If you can sell a pizza for $20 instead of $10, You can justify the cost of overtime pay for your staff or investing in a second oven. The higher the price, the more the producer is willing to offer. Crucially, we must distinguish between a change in the quantity supplied and a shift in the supply curve. If the price of pizza changes, we're simply moving from one point to another on the same line. The line itself doesn't move, only our position on it does, driven entirely by the price tag. What happens when these two opposing forces, the buyer wanting a low price and the seller wanting a high one, actually meet? There is a specific point where the quantity demanded exactly equals the quantity supplied. This is equilibrium. At this state, the market is stable. Everything produced is consumed and nothing is wasted. Economists call this the market clearing price, the exact point where the two curves intersect. But the real world is rarely that tidy. We often find ourselves in a state of disequilibrium. For instance, if the price is kept artificially low, a shortage occurs because the quantity demanded is far greater than the quantity supplied. In a free market, this creates a frenzy. Consumers will bid up the price of the remaining products until the market returns to equilibrium. On the flip side, if the price is set too high, a surplus occurs. You end up with shelves full of products that nobody wants at that price. To avoid losing everything, producers are forced to lower prices, often through sales or discounts, to eliminate the surplus and return to that stable center. But why does the entire curve move? We aren't just talking about moving along a line anymore. We're talking about the shifters, the determinants that physically push the entire curve to the right or left. Take tastes and preferences. If it's 40 degrees Celsius outside, the demand for ice cream shifts to the right. It increases regardless of the price. On a freezing winter day, it shifts to the left. Then there's the number of consumers. More people entering a market naturally increases demand. We also have to look at the price of related goods. If the price of a substitute, like a candy bar, rises, the demand for our primary product, ice cream, shifts to the right. However, if the price of a complement, like the waffle cone, increases, the overall demand for ice cream will decrease. Income is another major shifter. For normal goods, an increase in income leads to an increase in demand. But for inferior goods, the opposite happens. Top ramen is the classic example. As soon as someone's income rises, they stop buying the 2-minute noodles and switch to fresh pasta. Finally, there are expectations. If you expect the price of gold to skyrocket next month, your demand increases today. Supply has its own 5 shifters. First, the price of resources. If the cost of milk for ice cream increases, the cost of production rises, and supply shifts to the left. Conversely, if the cost of raw materials falls, supply shifts to the right. Then there is technology. A new automated machine that produces goods faster and cheaper will increase supply and shift the curve to the right. Government action also plays a role. Taxes on producers shift supply to the left, while subsidies shift it to the right. Regulations can also limit the total amount produced. Finally, the number of sellers and their expectations. More sellers mean more supply. But if producers expect prices to rise in the future, they might hold back their current stock to sell it later at a higher price. Beyond these shifters, we see direct government interventions like price ceilings and floors. But as we've seen, there are some products that actually become more popular the more expensive they get. It's fascinating how these micro-level movements create a massive ripple effect. When demand increases, both the equilibrium price and quantity increase. These aren't just abstract lines on a graph, they are the actual heartbeats of the economy. In macroeconomics, we apply these same principles to entire nations, using aggregate demand and aggregate supply. It's a single, cohesive logic that explains everything from a neighborhood pizza slice to the global trade of crude oil. Now we enter the territory of the rule breakers. Enter the Veblen good. Named after sociologist Thorstein Veblen, these are products where the law of demand is flipped on its head. For a Veblen good, the demand actually increases as the price rises. This happens because of the snob effect. For items like a Rolex, a limited edition Ferrari, or a Hermes Birkin bag, the value is not found in the utility, The bag doesn't hold things any better than a canvas one. Instead, the value is found in the price itself. The high cost serves as a signal of status and wealth. This is what we call conspicuous consumption. When the price of these items drops, they actually become less desirable to the target market because they lose their exclusivity. The higher the price, the more exclusive the item, and therefore, the higher the demand from those looking to signal their social standing. The function of the product is secondary. The price is the product. At the other end of the social spectrum, we find another paradox, the Giffen good. While Veblen goods are about luxury, Giffen goods are about survival. These are highly inferior goods that see an increase in demand even as their price rises, but for a heartbreaking reason, the poverty trap. Imagine a family that survives on a diet of bread and a small amount of meat. Bread is their primary staple. If the price of bread rises, the family can no longer afford the meat. Because they've lost their only source of protein and are still hungry, they're forced to spend their remaining money on more bread, even though the bread itself is now more expensive. In this scenario, the price increase makes the consumers poorer, and because they can no longer afford any substitutes, they must buy more of the staple good to survive. It's a cruel inversion of economic logic, where the poor are forced to buy more of a product precisely because it has become more expensive. Comparing Veblen and Giffen goods reveals a striking contrast. One is driven by the desire to be seen as superior, the other is driven by the desperate need to survive. Both break the law of demand, but for opposite reasons. One is the luxury of the elite, the other is the necessity of the impoverished. It shows that while the invisible hand of the market is powerful, it's often driven by human psychology and desperation, not just cold numbers. But as we move further into the 21st century, the organic equilibrium of the free market is changing. We are entering the era of algorithmic pricing. Today, many companies use black box software that changes prices in real time, based on your browsing history, your location, and your current demand. This isn't a negotiation between a buyer and a seller. It's a calculation by an AI that knows exactly how much you are willing to pay before you even know it yourself. When the algorithm decides the price, does the law of demand still exist, or have we moved into a world of perfect price discrimination? We've traveled from the high-stakes waiting lists of Ferrari to the desperate necessity of a staple loaf of bread. We've seen how a $2 pizza slice can reflect the global laws of supply and demand, and how the market-clearing price acts as a silent regulator of our daily lives. For most of us, the price tag is a fixed fact, but we now know it's actually a living, breathing number, the result of a tug-of-war between resource costs, technology, and human desire. From the substitution effect to the snob effect, the logic is consistent, yet fragile. As the invisible hand of the market is slowly replaced by the invisible code of an algorithm, we are left with one question. In a world where AI determines the price for every individual in real time, will we still be participants in a market or simply data points in a calculation?